Yeah. Okay.
Okay, what does value added mean? Value added means transforming syrup into another product. So, i.e., 1 gallon will make the following products: maple butter, about 13 250 ml jars at anywhere from $10 to $14 a jar, depending on where you're marketing. Okay. Granulated sugar, about 9 pounds at about $14 a pound, which would give you about $126. Okay. Maple toffee, about 700 ml tubs, or 108 sticks of toffee at $3 a piece, which would give you about $270. Maple sugar candy, about 130 pieces at $1.25 a piece, so your gallon turns into about $162.50. Okay. How to market value-added products effectively: make a nice display in front and center of your table. Okay. Keep your display full at all times if you can, unless you're running out of product. Choose packaging that shows the product. Okay, so what we try to do is we put our butter in glass jars. Our candy is actually in clear bags. If we're at a show, if we're at our normal market, I have a big Tupperware dish on the table that I take pieces out with tongs and put them in paper bags for people, so it stays nice and fresh. Okay. Sample your product. It's the most important thing you can do. Okay. Everybody has a taste of butter. They like it. Everybody gets a taste of candy. They normally like it. So if you can give them a taste or a sample, I know with COVID it's very hard right now, but when things get back to normal, if you can give a sample of what you're trying to sell, it'll sell much better. And last of all, be consistent in what you offer. Don't run out from to the market. If you do, you're going to have customers come up looking for something, and they're going to leave disappointed and probably go and find it somewhere else. Okay, so the syrup that we normally use for our butter and candy is our early season light or golden. Okay. For butter, last year's syrup works much better. Okay, it's a little tip. Something happens with the syrup when it sits for a year. It transforms into butter better. It makes a creamier product. So if you can afford to let a barrel sit for a year, you'll make way better butter out of it. Toffee and granulated are good with what we used to call a medium. Okay, somewhere in that medium spectrum. So middle of the road of the new amber. And early to mid season is better than later season syrup. And last of all, never use anything that you wouldn't eat yourself off of a spoon. Because you have to remember, we're concentrating the density here, which also means we're concentrating the flavors. So if you have a nice flavored syrup, it's going to make a nice flavored product. If it's a strong flavored syrup, it's going to get much stronger once you put it into transformation. Invert sugars are much lower in light syrup made in the early part of the season. So the best thing you can do is try and use an early syrup. If you're buying syrup in to make your butter and your candy and your sugar, try to buy it from the same person all the time, because everybody's syrup works differently. Okay, and invert sugar can cause a lack of transformation to happen. So if you're trying to get sugar to dry out, i.e. granulated, if it's not doing it, it's probably because it has too much invert sugar in it, or it's way too humid. Okay, so does the boiling point of water matter? Yes, it does. Boiling point of water is crucial to making value-added products. Okay. You need to find what the boiling point of water is every time you make value-added products. So you need to know where you're starting from. You add your degrees, i.e. butter, 21.5 to 22 degrees Fahrenheit above the boiling point of water. And just like making syrup, you should check it periodically throughout the day if you're making value added all day. Okay. Remember, you need to have consistent product every time the customer buys it. Okay, so when we make maple butter, we take a gallon of our best flavored early light syrup, or extra light, or golden, whatever you want to call it. Okay, put it in our pot, bring it to a boil. We reduce the heat as it comes to boil, so it doesn't boil over, because the first 15 seconds is kind of like a volcano when it starts to boil, so you need to reduce your heat to keep it from boiling over. You need to add your defoamer just as it's coming to a boil, and you need to use defoamer when you make butter. You can't get away without doing it, or sugar. Once the syrup is stabilized, you can turn the heat up again and bring it up to your temperature. We bring our butter to 21 to 22 degrees Fahrenheit above water. Set the pot in a water bath pool for around 4 hours or so. There's a couple things you can do here. You can put it in your laundry tub. It works well. You can put it in a tote, more like a Rubbermaid tote. Drill a hole near the top and run a garden hose in there and just let the water circulate. If you have a good well, it'll cool it much faster. It takes about 2 hours that way. Mist the surface of the syrup with cold water just as you're setting it into the water bath. Once the boiling stops, do not move it around, okay? Because the more you jiggle it, the more the sugar crystals are going to form in it. And make sure you mist it a couple of times while it's cooling. You need to take it out of the water once it's fairly cool and let it come up to room temperature to relax. This will make it easier to stir and will make a much better, creamier product. Okay, so when we're stirring the butter, you can do it many different ways. We have a gear pump machine now that we use. We used to use a beater from a mixer in a cordless drill. We also had a paddle style butter machine back in the day. So anyway, and you can stir it by hand with a big wooden spoon too. So basically you're going to stir it until it turns creamy. Okay. So it's going to turn to a butter color, and it's going to start to cream. And once the shine goes away off the butter, it's ready to go in the jars. Okay. If you're using a gear pump machine or a mixer, always keep a little bit of the syrup that you use to make the butter with handy, just in case something happens, sets up too fast, or you made it a little bit too thick and you're starting to plug your machine up. You can put a little bit of syrup in there and it'll help. Okay, so when we make maple candy, we're going to take some of the same syrup that we would have used for butter. Okay, so a little tip: what we do is we when we boil, all our syrup is drummed as we boil, because I don't have time to pack during the season because I'm busy working. So we take 2 or 3 barrels of extra light or golden, and we put it in glass gallon jars. So if we know we have the right syrup coming off the evaporator, we'll pump our filter tank into our canner and we'll can into glass jars. You can reuse these glass gallons over and over again with a new lid, okay, because this is really your own use and you know how they're getting washed. Okay, so we take some of this syrup that we have reserved aside. We find the boiling point of water. We have 27 degrees Fahrenheit. We boil the syrup to this temperature, just like you did with the butter. Okay, let the temperature fall back to approximately 212 degrees and stir until it changes to a creamy color. And either squeegee it into the molds right away or use your candy machine and fill your molds. Okay, you let the molds cool and then you pop them out carefully. Maple toffee, we use a nice light or medium syrup. Okay, early to mid-season is better. We find the boiling point of water. We add 24 degrees Fahrenheit, boil it to this point. We pour it into our containers. We're in a tray with deep sides filled with water to help them cool. Okay. You surround the tubs with cold water after they're full. It helps cool them a lot faster. You mist the surface just like you did with the butter again with previously boiled water. Okay. And place carefully into the freezer and let them freeze. Do not move them around or jiggle them because you'll make all kinds of sugar crystals in it. It's pretty well the same as butter. Okay, so we just said don't move them around. You can store toffee in the freezer for up to 3 months, sometimes 4, depending on how good the syrup was that you used. Okay, to reheat the toffee, put a tub in the microwave for about 1.5 minutes, and then you can carefully pour it on the snow. A 500-gram tub should make approximately 10 good-sized sticks at about $3 each. Okay, how to make granulated sugar. Take 1 gallon of good early syrup, light to medium in color, boil to 260, 265 degrees Fahrenheit, and stir until it dries out. Be very careful. It comes up a little bit like a volcano. It frosts and bubbles and spits at you. Make sure you don't get it on your skin because it is hot. 1 gallon makes about 9 pounds at average $14 per pound. Okay, and this is where you can recycle all your mistakes. So if you have a batch of butter or a batch of candy that didn't quite turn out, you can turn it into granulated most of the time, unless it's got too much invert sugar in it. So thank you very much for your time today. Anybody have any questions?
John, I think there's some questions in the chat, isn't there?
I think you're on mute, Sean.
Okay, well, I have a couple questions, Steve, and they're pretty generic. Okay, so we make butter all year round. It's far easier to cool it in the winter than it is now. So how do you cool your butter down this time of year?
When it's really hot like this, I put it in a water bath. So I'll either do it in the laundry sink. We have 2 5-gallon stainless steel Surge milker pails. They come up a little bit to a taper at the top, so they've got a nice and big wide opening on them. I put a wet tea towel over top, keep the humidity in. I mist them, and then I change the water in the laundry tub 4 or 5 times within 2 hours, or I put them out in a tote that I cut a hole in about 3/4 of the way up, and I set them on a brick so that the bottoms get cold too, and I pump cold water into them with the garden hose. Either way works well.
Okay, is there a temperature you cool it down to, or you just go by 4 hours?
I normally cool it down until it's cool to the touch, and then I bring it back up to room temperature before I stir it.
Okay. And how do you bring it back to room temperature? Just by bringing it back into the room, or?
Yeah, I just set it on the counter. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're in a hurry, you can cool it to room temperature. It doesn't always turn out as creamy that way. You really need to, once you've made butter and sugar for a few years, you learn how to cheat. But when you're first starting, it's better to let it cool down cold and then bring it back up to room temperature. it always seems to turn out better.
Okay. So when you say you let it down to cool down to touch is room temperature, or it's going to be colder than that?
Depends on if you catch it in time or not. I just bring it down to temperature where it's you can feel it's still a little bit warm, but not freezing cold.
Okay. We know humidity has a huge effect, especially on sugars. Are there days that you won't make butter, whereas or sugars?
Yeah, when it's 40 degrees out with about 100% humidity, don't try it. It's we did a presentation at I think this was the one you helped me with actually at Atkinson's when we bought them about 5 years ago. We did like a grand opening, open house type thing, and I volunteered to do a value added presentation. Um, we made granulated sugar that was more like molasses. It just would not, no matter how much we stirred it, it would not turn over for us. And this was the same syrup that I always used to make butter with, so I knew it would work. But it was about 35 degrees and it was about 100% humidity that day. It was very, very humid. Granulated does not work when it's humid. The butter video that I did that's going to play after this was done. The humidity was 94% that day when the butter was stirred and it was boiled the night before. The humidity level was about the same. Butter will work. You need to add about 0.2 or 0.3 if it's very humid, and just be careful. But once you get onto it, once you get doing it, you'll realize what you need to do. It's just all in paying attention to what the syrup's doing.
Steve?
Yep.
It's Randall Goodfellow. Could you comment on the extra costs of transforming the syrup into these value-added products and the cost of packaging and whether the marketing is more costly? Anything related to those extra things? I mean, it's good to have extra returns, but what are the expenses associated with it?
It's most value-added products, you're going to double the value of your syrup, and then some. Some of them are quite good. If you're going to a market anyways to sell your syrup, value-added will help you sell for sure. The extra packaging probably works out to about the same as packaging a container of syrup. Basically, that's really it. The machines are expensive though. I mean, you're going to tie up in a good butter machine. You're going to tie up about $2,300 likely, which isn't cheap. If you make enough butter, it pays for itself easily, and they're very convenient to use. So it depends on what you want to do, where you want to go. If you're planning on being at a market for a while, or you're going to sell most of your product through a market, you won't sell enough product without value added on your table to make it worth your time going, I don't think.
My second question, Steve, is what other value-added products can be made from maple syrup, sort of the vinegars and other beverages? And do you have any experience with these things, or do you know of people who could speak to those?
So we had one fellow that was buying containers from us that was doing like a maple water drink type thing. He was taking syrup and thinning it down with distilled water and making a drink out of it. We have a few producers now that are doing sap water, like sap in Tetra Paks. It's quite lucrative. It's not for everybody. You need to have the equipment to do it. You need to have pasteurization and all that stuff too. But yes, there is a market there for sure.
Vinegars?
Vinegars, yeah, there's a good market for vinegar. I've never made it myself. I don't know how to make it actually. probably wouldn't mind trying it if I could figure out how to do it.
Thanks.
Hey, Stephen, you say you have a video you'd like to show?
Yeah, so John has linked to the video. I think there's a few more questions there if there's time.
Oh, we've got time.
I can read a couple of them here, Steve. Do you test for invert sugars? And if so, what are you looking for to use in the different confections?
Okay, so we don't test for invert ourselves. There are ways you can do it. We always use barrel number 2, 3, and 4 for our value added stuff. Every year we just take our first barrel, goes in bottles because the flavor isn't what you want for making confection. It either goes in bottles or goes to the wholesaler, one of the two, depending on how it turns out. Second barrel, third barrel, fourth barrel, they're normally the barrels that are much lighter. They taste better. They have that nice buttery finish on the end. So that's the syrup that we normally choose to do our value added with. So we've never needed to check for invert sugar. If you're buying syrup in, you'll know the production dates in your area. So make sure you buy an early barrel from a producer that you're buying from. It will work much better. And if you're just using random syrup to make your value added, that's fine if that's the way you want to do it. But you're going to need to know how to use the invert sugar index. You can find a formula for that on, I think Cornell or Proctor, one of the two. You can definitely find a formula on how to test invert sugar with a.
It's Cornell's website.
Diabetics use to test their blood sugar.
Yeah, blood sugar machine. Yeah. Okay, we've got a question. Using a CDL butter machine, the manual states that a second batch can be run immediately. Every time we do this, the first batch is perfect. The second batch develops very fine crystals. Invert sugar levels and temperatures are within spec. Any idea why the second batch doesn't work and needs to be reprocessed?
That's strange. If you're running it back, like when we do our butter, we normally boil 10 to 15 gallons of syrup down in the butter at a time. And I just keep emptying pails into the machine as I fill the last jar of pails on top of the machine right away. So we've never experienced that. You will get sugar crystals in your pails if you keep moving them around. So if you put too much butter in there to cool, it may be an issue of getting the butter out. Because once you stir it once or move it once, it starts to form crystals. So if you
we've done both ways. We boiled 19.4 liters all in one batch and cooled it. We've done batches of exactly 7 liters, what the manual says, and cooled them. It doesn't matter. That second batch always gets fine crystals in it. Is that just acceptable in the industry, or are we being too anal here?
I'm not sure. We don't experience that with ours.
If I can just interject here, Steve, seeing you use my machine to make the butter. I have the CDL machine, and I do, Phil, occasionally get some crystals in it. And it's like Steve says, if I make a lot at once, or sometimes move it too much, I'll get a fine crystal on the top, and it ends up in your butter. Otherwise, no, I do 3 pails at a time, so which is almost 7.5 to 8 gallons of syrup at a time in 3 different pails. And I start off with a half a pail, and I even take turns, like half of one pail, half of another pail, half of another, and then I start mixing it all together. So normally on the norm, 80% of the time I don't have crystals, but the odd time there is. But I have a lot of customers that just love that crystal that's in there.
Well, and these are not the bigger crystals that would form on the top of the syrup or along the edge. We've had that, and that was an issue on our end. This is within the butter itself. It's the crystalline structure is bigger than it ought to be. Maybe it's just us being anal, I guess.
Okay, no, just I do have some crystals, but they're very, very fine crystals, very fine.
Is it, okay, so that is normal and acceptable, is it?
It's not. I don't think it's acceptable if you go by the butter gurus, but it does happen. And like I say, I do have customers that do like the crystal in it.
Oh, okay. And I think that may just be what our expectation is versus what the norm is. Okay. The other question then that I have is a little further down is how do you hot pack it? Because our health unit here has told us it must be kept refrigerated and we therefore cannot ship it unless it's hot packed. But how do you hot pack it?
They don't know what they're talking about.
Well, yeah, but I don't get to argue with them that way. Like I've told them that, and I've told them we're governed under a map, and the map doesn't say it has to be. The health unit says I don't really care. We say it does that.
When we ship any, we ship it frozen.
Okay.
It definitely thaws during the shipment for sure. But I only ship it to really good friends and family. We don't ship our butter. We sell it local right on our table at the market, and it goes to the market frozen. If there's any left, it goes back in the freezer until the next week, so it doesn't separate. I don't know what to tell you there. I mean, health units are horrendous to deal with. They're tough to deal with. I mean, we beat our head against the wall last summer to get our market open. I'm the president of our market, and we beat our heads against the wall with the health department trying to get open, and it was a farmer's market.
There is a way to do it though, because if you go into any airport in this country, there's butter sitting there on the shelf. And I've talked to Turkey Hill and LB Maple Creek, and they say it's possible, but they won't tell me how to do it. So there's got to be a way. I just can't figure out for the life of me what it is. We're playing right now with hot bottles and putting butter into it, and they seem to be sealing, but I'm not sure the health unit's going to be happy with that.
It's funny you should say that, Phil. I was just going to announce that. Forgot you being the pilot and all, but yes, every airport has that. Plus, I know a number of stores that have it just sitting on the shelves. Any stores I sell to, though, I ask them to refrigerate it immediately, so they put it into refrigeration units. And that I have shipped across this country. I've shipped in the States, and I've shipped to Europe, and the butter was good at the other end.
Well, maybe that's one of the things that the Research, Technology Transfer and Training Committee could take up from a technology transfer perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Just a thought.
It would be awesome to know how to do it.
And I think I think
your other question there about the sugar crystals. As you progress in the grades of syrup, the sugar crystals get way bigger, right? So, like, I'm not sure what you're using for your butter, but if it's not super, super, super light, it may have a little bit of crystal in it.
We check the invert sugar level on every step.
Okay.
But I'm sure that many times early season works and everything, but we've invested and gotten all the proper testing equipment and everything. So every single batch gets tested for invert sugar levels, so we know which ones are good for butter and sugar and various other products. So no, we're going with the Cornell table that has their recommendations. I'm assuming they've done the research.
Okay. But the darker the syrup, the bigger the crystal naturally, right? So it could be the syrup's a little darker. I'm not sure what you're using. You know what I mean?
Should we pick up a couple other questions? I think Philip, are you happy with that for now?
Oh yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, good.
Okay. Yeah, there's another one here. How much do you stir the maple candy before pouring into the molds? We have yield issues with the candy firming up in the stirring pig.
So you're stirring a little bit too long. We just wait. When it just starts to turn color, we get it out of the pig as quickly as possible, and we don't add a ton at a time. We just put a little bit in there at a time. So the other thing too is you can keep a plastic butter knife or a silicone butter knife use that to clean the opening out a little bit to get it moving again. Don't use a stainless knife because if you get a jammed in there, you're going to break something or hurt yourself. But we do that from time to time. But most of the time, we try and get it out of there before it turns like gritty or granulate, because then it gets really, really hard to get out.
Steve, we also found when we were going in cold weather was harder. So we heat the trough a bit with a hot air gun just before we start, so that it's not dropping, a lot in temperature again.
Yeah, the first blow always is much harder to get out of the trough.
Yeah, so that first bit is a little easier to handle. Yeah,
because you're dumping it into the cold worm and the cold trough, and it sucks the heat out of it.
Yeah. Okay, and another one, for candy making, I've found room humidity makes a difference to the takeoff temperature. Any comment on this?
Yeah, humidity can play all kinds of games with your value added. The drier it is, the easier it is. So if you have air conditioning in your house, it's much easier to make candy in air conditioning than it is outside. The outside humidity definitely plays a big role in whatever you're doing with syrup.
So wait for that good day.
If you don't have air conditioning in your house, yes, wait for that. It doesn't have to be a cold day, but as long as it's a clear day and it's fairly dry, a day after a big thunderstorm isn't always the best time.
Yeah. There's also questions about the presentation being available, and I'm going to post up your video, but I'll also make sure we can post up this PDF as well. So.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to chat with
yeah, is that okay?
with marketing, but yes, if it's available, yes, we can definitely post it for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Right. I won't know until about the 3rd of August because everybody's on vacation right now.
Okay. Sounds
shut down, but yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't
I don't have a problem on my end sharing it. It just depends on what CDL wants to do.
Yeah. Okay. So why don't I run the video, and then if there's any questions after that, we can do them, and away we go.
Perfect. Thanks, John.
Okay. No problem. Just take me 1 second.
Hi, my name is Steve Skinner. I'm from CDL Perth, and I'm going to do a demonstration today on how to make butter. So we took some of our best extra light syrup, boiled it this morning to 21.5 above the boiling point of water, and let it cool. So before we cool it, we take a squirt bottle and mist the top of previously boiled water, and that helps break the surface tension so you don't get any sugar crystals on the surface. As you can see, the surface is nice and uniform. That's what you're looking for before you put it in your machine. Okay? So it's very important before you do this, you measure the boiling point of water so you know exactly what the boiling point of water is at that time. You add 21.5 degrees to it, and your product should turn out pretty good. Everybody's syrup works a little bit differently here, so it's going to be a little bit of trial and error, but 21.5 is about where you want to be in Fahrenheit. So before we put the butter in the machine, we're going to turn it on first, because the pump needs to be moving when the butter gets in there. butter's going to churn for approximately 10 minutes before it starts to turn colors. Starting to turn a little bit already. You want to keep moving it around a little bit so that everything blends uniformly. As you can see, it's starting to turn color just a little bit. Another couple of minutes and it should be close to ready. The nice thing with these gear pump machines is they make a nice creamy product. If you have any sugar crystals in your syrup that you previously boiled, because maybe it sat a bit too long, or it didn't cool properly, or it got jiggled around, whatever happened, it normally grinds them up pretty good, so you can't really tell that they're there. So you can see it's starting to turn a more creamy color there now. We're getting close to ready to put it in the jars. I normally wait until it turns almost whitish. The other thing with the butter too is if you want to make subsequent batches, with the gear pump machine is very easy. Once you get the first batch through, what I try to do is we make 10 or 15 gallons at a time, so I cool it in 5-gallon milker pails that I have at home with large open lids on them, and I just pour another couple of gallons in the machine at a time. Once we've got the first batch through, we just keep going. So it saves a lot of cleanup. Nice thing about the gear pump too is the butter doesn't separate as quickly, so if you put it in the deep freeze after you make it, it stabilizes and stays put, it doesn't separate. And then you just take a case or two out for the market when you want to go to a market or an event or a festival, wherever you're going to sell your syrup. Or if your store needs another delivery, it's readily available in the freezer. The best time to make butter is a nice bright sunny day when the pressure's high. Low pressure, it tends not to work as well. The humidity's too high. For some reason it doesn't turn out as well. So if you're new at it or just trying it, pick a nice sunny day where the air is nice and dry, and it's much easier to do. Okay, so you can see we're just about ready now. You'll see the lighter ring around the outside, and it's starting to peak on the side of the machine a little better. So another couple minutes here and we'll be good to go. You can see the color difference on the side here. machine over to the side of the counter with the valve facing you and put a pail underneath. It'll drip into your pail for you, so you won't have a big mess on your counter. I'm doing it this way so you can see it, so my back isn't turned to you. So once it starts to chug, we take the sides and wipe them down to get all the butter out. And you can see now it's a nice light color. It's starting to set up a little bit. A little tip for beginners too is if you're first trying this out is keep a little bit of the syrup that you boiled as raw syrup on hand in case it gets too thick and out of control. You can add a little bit and get it out of the machine without jamming it all up. Okay, so a little tip, it's easier to clean the machine right away with some hot water, run it through. It'll get everything out of the pump and loosen everything up. Thanks very much for joining us today. Have a great day.
If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button. Be sure to subscribe and press the notification icon to get updates on new product videos.
Steve, maybe the way to approach it is to ask if we can link to it. And that sounds like that video is up already, so we could link to that and then see about your presentation. There's a couple more questions. Should you be wearing a hairnet?
Normally my hair isn't this long either, but I haven't been into the salon because it's COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably could have put a hairnet on. I was at work. I did the video late last week to get it ready for this week. And yeah, I probably should have put one on, but
Yeah. Hey, things are different these days. And I just have a question about how you do, like you said, you put, you'll do up like 5 or 10 gallons and then run it through. So when are you doing that in, say, 2 or 3 gallon batches at a time and then putting it all into one big container and cooling it down, or how do you manage that?
yeah, normally I do it in 3 gallon batches. I have a paddle style butter machine that I bought welded pans for back when the FSI food safety initiative was on. We bought welded pans for our butter machine. I now use them to boil my value added because our butter machine is only used for granulated. So one stays on the machine for granulated and the other one I use to boil. I have 3 Surge milker pails. They have about a 10-inch brim on them. They're not like the De La Val ones that fit a cone filter. These actually have a nice big rim on them. If you can find them at a sale, they're awesome for cooling butter in because you don't have to transfer it into anything else. You just boil it, pour it in, and then put it in your water bath to cool. They work great for that. So if you can find some at a sale, they're wicked.
So you're boiling 3 gallons in one of the big flat pans.
Yeah.
So that's like, well, 3 times 4, you're like 12, 13 liters at a time in the big flat pan, and then just pour it right into the cooling pan and or your cooling jugs. Yeah.
Right into my cooling pail when I'm using
Yeah.
the cool. I
Yeah.
use the milker pails. I find they cool quicker because they absorb more heat.
Yeah.
So you get more chill on them faster.
Yeah.
I can use plastic pails too, the food grade plastic pails. There's a lot of people use those. I'm not a huge fan of putting 232 degree syrup into a plastic pail myself, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we use the stainless ones. It seems to work pretty good.
Yeah.
Watch the sales, you'll find them.
Yeah. Any other questions for Steve from the chat, or if you want to open your mic? Oh, it's there's one here. What do you do with what's left in the machine on the last run? The house jar.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
We scrape the hopper out as best we can with that orange. That orange squeegee thing I'm using is a food grade silicone squeegee, but it's fairly stiff. I think it's made by Rubbermaid. You buy them at Walmart, wherever. They work really good because they're easy to clean and they have nice flat surface on them, so you can scrape everything out pretty good with them.
Yeah.
We use that, and we have a plunger that we got made for the pipe. So we push it out of the pipe as well. Normally it fills a jar and a bit. So there's a jar that goes in the fridge, and then there's a bowl that goes to my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Spoon.
Yep. Nick, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a comment about cleaning the machine out. Yeah, you can do it physically like that, mechanically, but also if you warm up some syrup and run it through too, it dissolves what's left in there, and I just use that for the next batch. It works really.
That's a great idea.
Yeah,
That's a great idea. Yeah, absolutely. That's awesome.
I also, when you're cooling, thing I've learned over the years is sometimes it's better to get it extra cold. So I have started to do, and it seems to work well, is yes, put it in a water bath, get that residual heat out of it, and then I stick carefully, very carefully with the lid on, take the pan and stick the whole thing in the freezer and freeze it overnight or 2 days or 3 days, whatever you want. And yes, I do spray it down when I'm water bathing it to get off any crystals on the surface. But when it comes out of the freezer, there's absolutely no crystals on the top. And then you set it out and just let it come up to the temperature you would use it at. And sometimes it's a little bit cooler than what you were using there. And yes, it's stiffer. And I do about 13, 14 liters at a time, but I would divide that in maybe 2 batches or 3 batches. Okay. And then follow one after the other. And I don't have any problems with crystals. And like I say, you can just put it on the counter and let it come up to room temperature, which does take some time after it's been out of the freezer. But if you time it with other things you're doing, in your bottling room, then there's no loss of time there, and I think it controls it a lot better. So, anyhow, yeah.
Okay, great. Anything else to add? Oh, Brian, we have a draw to do.
Well, just before we do that, Steve, there's an opportunity here if you want to talk about any CDL new products, in the next short minute or two before we do a draw for your thing.
So, we're gonna try and do some kind of a virtual open house here at the store in the fall. Hopefully we can actually get open and do our normal fall open house at the store. We'll see what COVID does. There's lots of new stuff. Check out the catalog, silos, monitoring, all kinds of new things to check out. So if you see something in the catalog you're not sure, give me a shout. I'll be happy to walk you through it.
Okay.
And we will be on, the whole company's on vacation until the 3rd of August.
As most of Quebec is, so all the manufacturers are down.
yeah, we're all down right now.
Well, thank you, Steve. You've always made great presentations at this, and it is a lovely product. And as you say, it's a moneymaker. And the containers don't cost you any more than putting it in a Kent bottle. So